Hi, welcome to tutorials on servlets. In this tutorial, we are going to see how can we handle forms using servlets and how can we store the data that is entered in a user login form in a database table. This is the example we are going to see in this tutorial. For that, let me create a dynamic web project. Login web application is the application name I am giving, and I am choosing the servlet version, and I am deploying this to Apache Tomcat 7. Click on next, then next, simply click on finish. This is the directory structure of our web application. Now let me open this web.xml file. These are the tags that were written by Eclipse IDE for us initially. This is the diagrammatic representation of our example. This is the browser. Inside browser we have this user login form, and we, after entering data into these fields, username and password, we click on this login button. So when we click on this login button, what will happen internally is we will call a servlet that is part of our web application, and inside this servlet we write code to communicate with the database server, and we store whatever the data we have entered in our login form in our database table. So as part of our application development, we are using MySQL database as database server. So this is the diagrammatic representation of our example, our application. Now let's go to the development environment. For this, what we have to create first is this user login form we have to create. This login form we have to create. For that, let me create an HTML file. For that, you have to select this web content and give a right click, select this new followed by HTML file option to create an HTML file, and change the name login form.html file I have given like that, and click on finish. For this, what we have to do is we have to make use of the HTML tags that are part of HTML language. Table, I am creating a table for neat formation of our fields. That's why I'm using this table. On top of them, this is the code we have written in order to create a login form. Now let me explain the code for you. This is form tag we use to create a login form, and we have given some nickname or alias name to our login form, and we have to discuss more about this action attribute, and it is not the time to discuss about this one. Let's discuss about that later on. So in order to align things neat and tidy, so I am making use of this table tag, table row, and here I am creating a label username, and table data we use here for every row, and here I am making use of an input control called text, and I have given some name to this input text control. Again, I am creating a new row. As part of second row, I am making use of this table data to specify td tag to specify table data, and I am giving label password, and here I am using a different input control. Instead of text, here I am using password here because passwords are not visible to the user. That's why in order to make these as a invisible thing, there is an input control in HTML language, that is password. So while entering data, you cannot see what data you are entering in that text field. That's why we are making use of this password as our input control, and I have given some alias name to this input control password. That is, here I have given the nickname as password, and I am creating a new row. As part of new row, I am creating an input control type of button, submit button, and I am changing the label on the submit button to login with the help of this value attribute. And again I am giving some name for this submit button as login button. Now let's look at the preview of the code what we have written. Simply click on this preview and you will see the preview of the HTML, I mean the HTML login form preview. So this is the our form, so we will make use of as part of our application. Now let me go to this source view, and this is the DAG overall code we have written for designing this user login form. Now let me create a servlet. For that you have to select this Java resource, give right click, news, and choose servlet here, and give the some package name, and give class name as login servlet, and click on this next. Change the URL pattern, uncheck the super class constructors, and we need only do get method, not the do post. Click on finish. This Java file is written for us. Now what we will do as part of our servlet is we will get whatever the information that we have entered in our login form into this servlet. So in order to do that one, I mean in order to capture the data that is entered by user in the login form, we make use of this request object, because when we hit the login button, the control will comes to this servlet. So as part of our servlet, we write the code to capture the data that is entered by the user in this login form. For that I am writing the code now. Now capture the data that is entered in the user login form. For that I am making use of this request object as I said earlier. So now request object dot, there is a method called get parameter method which will give you the value of a parameter you passed as argument to this get parameter method. So what kind of value we provide as parameter this get parameter method is whatever the name you have given. Let me go to source view. Whatever the name you have given, I mean the alias name you have given for your input control here. For this input control here I have given alias name as username for this input control. So simply whatever the name you have given, I mean the alias name, copy that one and type the same here itself and pass the same value, I mean the same alias name as argument to this get parameter method. As all we know, if you check the return type of this get parameter method, it is a string type of return value. Here you can see string. So now let's create a string variable, string username value, to store the value that is returned by this username. Now in the same manner, let us capture the value that is entered for password value. Request dot get parameter followed by name. Whatever the value you have given for this, whatever the name you have given for this password, you have to pass the same as value to this get parameter method. So type, that's it. In this step we capture the data that is entered in our login form and make sure these things should not be null. If username value not equal to null or password. Among these two things, password value not equal to null value. So none of these values should not be null. That's why we are writing this if statement. We are checking whether the values are null or not in this line of statement. Now let's write the code that communicate with the database MySQL. So in order to do that, let me write this try and catch block, because the code that we write to communicate with the database server may raise runtime exception. So in order to communicate with the database server, we need a driver class. So we have to look at the manuals of our database server, which class is used by our database server as our driver class. For that, use this class object class dot for name method. Here class name string value it is taking. Here in case of MySQL, the driver class is com.mysql.jdbc.driver is the driver class for MySQL database. After that, first of all, we have to load this driver class. After loading the driver class, what we have to do is we have to create a connection object by passing the 3 parameters. Let's look about those parameters later. Now let me create a connection object. SQL connection equal to driver manager class. We make use of the get connection method that takes 3 arguments. Here you can see first the one is the URL, and the second one is the username, and third one is the password. Here what this URL represents? This URL represents the location of the database server and its port number. Location represents where the database server is running, and the port number used by your database server. So the URL always starts with the JDBC followed by JDBC. After that, the database type you are using MySQL followed by colon 2/s localhost I am using because my MySQL server is running on same machine, and the port number used by MySQL is 3306, and you have to specify the database schema you are using. Because I am using test database schema, that's why I have specified test database schema. This whole thing will be considered as the URL for a database. Here user represents the username, what user you are using, and I am using the same standard user root, and the password I have given for this root is also same as username. I mean the password is also root. After that, what we have to do is, after creating connection object, now let me write the comment. Connection object to communicate with the database. After creating the connection object, we have to create a statement object. Create a statement object to execute queries. That's it. For that, let me create a prepared statement object. You can create that prepared statement object from connection object. Control space connection dot prepare statement, followed by you have to pass the query you would like to execute on database, and here I am writing that as query string variable, but that variable is not defined yet. Now let me define that variable.